Are there any particular tools that you think an aspiring data scientist must learn? Like, is there some tool or tools out there that you think are critical that some people are missing?
Well, it's not so much. I mean, there are some tools obviously that I use on a regular basis, and I'll share those in a moment. But I think we have to find a way to deal with this fact that for a long time, at least, the cool kids had to do everything 100% coding, right? Because the idea was that um, if you didn't do that, then somehow you were revealing that you didn't have the skill set that the cool kids had, or what have you, right? Because I've been on calls with clients, and they're working in. I've actually had tons of these kinds of calls where I'm having mentoring calls where, for whatever reason, we have to do a calculation or rerun a model on the fly. And we just say, the most efficient way is going to be able to do it like right this minute. So I've had that experience where on the other side of the Zoom call, they're using a tool that's like IBM SPSS Modeler, which I used forever, or now more often it's Nime, right? But I've also been on calls where they're in a Jupyter notebook and they're doing Python or whatever. Okay. I think that low code, no code is just plain faster. And again, I run the risk of not being invited to have lunch with the cool kids, if I say that. But again, it's partly, I don't want to be overly blunt, but sometimes it feels like a show off kind of a thing. But the other reason, and this is the more legitimate reason, if we don't do everything in code, then we're going to run into problems when we go into production, because we're going to have to rewrite it or something like that. That's usually the argument that's made. Or if everybody in the organization is a Python coder, then that is inherently going to make things more efficient. It makes a lot of logical sense, doesn't it? But I've never observed it to be true. I've never observed a seamless deployment from a prototype model ever in almost 30 years. And I've never actually experienced being inside a building where everybody uses the same tool, right? So I get that it's a logical argument, but if it doesn't exist in the real world, I don't think it carries a lot of weight with me. So I think that low code, no code shouldn't be just for the so-called citizen data scientists, because I've never really understood why everybody in the building should be building models. Everybody in the building should be exploring data, but that's BI, not machine learning, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't I don't think
Especially,
that's the argument for low code, no code. I think the argument for low code, no code is it's faster.
yeah. I think especially because there are lots of gotchas that you need to have some expertise in, like selection bias when you're building models, feature drift. There's tons of examples. So those could be dangerous if anybody could be doing it. But in terms of exploring data and being able to draw your own conclusions from data, plotting some trends, and yeah, everybody should be able to do that. And yeah, it's I definitely get your point that it does not seem like the coolest thing to be discussing low code, no code for data scientists, but you could see how it would make things more efficient, and it could reduce the number of issues on interoperability between different people's processes, moving things to production. And now, so you have a lot of experience with low code and no code tools. So you've created a lot of courses, you've written a lot of books on these kinds of tools. So you started as an SPSS, which is the statistical package for the social sciences, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And that was my first exposure to statistics,
Huh.
and I thought it was great. I mean, I felt like I had a good understanding of what was going on under the hood. Whether I'm using a click and point UI in SPSS or writing it as a line of code in some Python package, it's the same level of abstraction, really.
Well, I mean, there's so much to say about this. A quick note that supposedly they retired the acronym a long time ago, so it became, uh, kind of like MCI. Actually, does that company still even exist? But there's
It's
certain
like
acronyms.
BP, British Petroleum.
Yeah. Eventually, it just becomes the acronym because they didn't want to limit themselves to just the social sciences. But the metaphor that I think is appropriate here, and it really fits SPSS too, is it's like a single lens reflex camera, or even those really cool mirrorless cameras now. And I think you probably have more audio video talent than I do. But these cameras, it could be $5,000 camera or something. It's got an auto setting, but you can turn that thing off. And that's what I think is powerful about a low code world. Probably accurately to call it something like KNIME, for instance, the KNIME analytics platform.
Yeah,
And
and let's
that's,
spell that out for our
yeah,
listeners. KNIME, NIME.
yeah.
And I'll be sure to have a link to that in the show notes. It is a tool that I first learned about it at ODSC West 2019 at a lunch or something. I was sitting next to somebody who was giving a talk on KNIME, and I hadn't heard of it before, but now it pops up all the time. And so, yeah, let our listeners know what it is.
Yeah. So in the K in KNIME, by the way, stands for Constance, Germany, because that's where the company
University.
was founded.
Yeah.
But it's what they call visual programming, which is also SPSS modeler. SPSS statistics is what you were referring to. It physically looks like Excel, but it's got very different features and it does statistics. SPSS modeler looks like a flowchart. And that came out, believe it or not, in 94. 94. It was called Clementine way back then. KNIME has been around for probably a little bit less than half that time, but many years now, 10, 12, 15 years plus. And KNIME also looks like a flowchart. So you can rapidly draw the flowchart. And if you're going to run everything on defaults, you don't have to go in to the symbols and make changes, but you can indeed make those changes. So in that sense, again, I invite people to kind of imagine that they're working with a really nice camera and they could get a simple everyday lens that worked under most, a simple zoom lens or something, and then keep everything on auto, and they'd never have to go to photography school, and learn all the fancy settings. But the fancy settings are there, so you can rapidly prototype, but then you can go deeper when you need to. And I think that's the power of tools like this. So particularly young data science teams, where I really think the coding thing starts to become a problem is when it completely drives not just what the team aspires to do, but it starts to affect things like hiring. Oh, we can't hire that R person because we're a Python shop, right? Or we can't hire that person with 25 years of insurance fraud experience because they're a SaaS person. Then I think the tail is wagging the dog, and I think it starts to get a little crazy, right? So I just encourage folks to say that these tools should be on the table. That doesn't mean that everybody in the world should adopt one of these tools, but we should make it clear that it's okay to learn these tools. And the other thing I would add is that I think introductory data science classes, generally speaking, should use these tools, because then you can focus on the concepts. And somebody might take 2 semesters of a data science class using a tool like this, and then at the master's level they might decide to do an MBA. What a talented analytics manager that person's going to be, because they really understand some of it, right? Whereas if we put Python 101 as a barrier of entry, we're reducing the top of the funnel. And from an education standpoint, that doesn't make a bit of sense. So The way I've solved this problem at UC Irvine, because I'm not faculty, I'm well, adjunct, whatever you want to call it. I'm an instructor in the Department of Continuing Ed. And I nearly walked away from it a couple of years ago because they were going to change the program, and it wasn't quite clear what my courses were going to fit, because there's invariably this issue about whether or not my courses should come after a Python intro or what have you, or if everybody's going to do Python, or if there's ever going to be a program that involves an option other than Python, right? It's a debate that universities are all having. But what they did to entice me, and it was kind of an offer I couldn't refuse, was I'm working on a 3-course sequence. It's probably going to start next fall, but where I'm the only instructor. And the reason that this solved this problem was, since it's only 3 courses, there's no pushback that it's going to be 9, because there's no room in 3 courses. You can't have the first course be Python grammar. A third of your time is over, right? You're not going to be able to learn any concepts. In a short certificate program like this, I don't know where they're headed. I don't know if they're doing a career change, or if they're someone that is maybe more IT or data engineering, but they want to learn more about machine learning than they already know, right? But with 3 courses that are 10 weeks each, I can weave in the project management and the value estimation that we were talking about earlier. Because if I had a course that was called Machine Learning Project Management, nobody'd want to take it because they would think that wasn't sexy enough for their CV or for their LinkedIn, right? So I have to kind of sneak it in. Reminds me of when I was a little kid of TV dinners. I'm dating myself big time, because that was like, I grew up when Tang and TV dinners and all that kind of stuff, they were the tinfoil thing that you put in the oven. But they would put this is like when I was a little kid, they would put, underneath the vegetables, they would put like a little picture of a pirate or whatever. they had to trick you into having the vegetables. I think it's crazy that we have to trick people into worrying about analytics project management. But universities will tell you that if that's a separate course, it doesn't get the enrollment that a parade of algorithms gets.